The thing though is this though, right? And I think here's where I probably would connect this back to that book, Don't Talk About Politics. We probably, so back to the concept of infrastructure or affordances. As a society, I think we can do better to build an infrastructure that allows people in a way to, firstly, I wouldn't even call it like acknowledge this like groundlessness of our existence, but rather to like allow dialogue, allow, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like how to even
I think it's like I think it's something to do with sort of taking away people's like agency and worth, but based off of kind of like luck or something like that. You know, where I think that's a lot of like we like give too much of a voice to someone because they say like, oh, I was a scholar at Oxford or some shit like that, as if that makes their voice, as if when it comes to like basically values where people are representing their own commitments in life socially, as if like being educated makes you a better human who should be able to make those decisions for other people. Like it's something like that, I think. But I don't. Maybe you're going in a different direction. I don't.
No, I absolutely was. Look, I think I'm not a class reductionist, but I think so much of the problems we're facing is it's class. Like so much of like all the race stuff to like the anti-immigrant stuff to this trans, whatever, right? It's so much of it is like there's symptoms of like a class antagonism, which is why it kind of really bothers me when I hear like progressives get too obsessed with like these, I don't know, like, genders and bathrooms and toilets and all that. Who gives a shit, man? Like, I mean, I just want to take a shit, I don't care. It's like, it's like, and I don't know. Like, so for instance, recently I had this Marxist philosopher, Daniel on, and his whole thing was that the biggest mistake the left made was they stopped talking about class. And I think I agree. And I think so much of, in a way, so much of like these contemporary cultural issues can be analyzed through a class lens without reducing it to a class lens either. And what I mean by that is you're right in the sense that like, yeah, class is one factor, but there are all these other more, what I would call existential realities of being human, which also have to be acknowledged.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think whenever I talk about class, I'm definitely not sort of saying that there are these neatly divided strata of society. I'm kind of talking quite loosely about a collection of people with aligned political incentives, right? As a result of a lot of things, like there's historical factors in there. Like for example, in the UK, there's inherited kind of aristocracy and stuff, right? That's one thing,
Yeah.
but there's aligned incentives around, like, say, property ownership, or whether your income comes from like capital gains versus working a job, all sorts of things, right? But I think that these explanations are quite powerful for making sense of a lot of these things, because you can understand essentially why certain things happen, or how certain bad outcomes are the result of political choices that are made by a certain group of people with those aligned incentives being kind of preferred over another, right? So, and I think that this, I can speak most confidently in the UK context, but it is very closely connected to things like philosophy or things like academia, because, and this is a result, what I was talking earlier to Camille, is like, you think of like what society gives rise to philosophy, say, right? And it's a society built on the labor of slavery that allows people like Aristotle, the son of a wealthy chief, to have the free time.
That's so true.
To be able to write
Have the
and talk
time and
about
energy to like think and
and I think you see, I mean, maybe like doing a detour through history, right? But I definitely see the same things in, like, say, very recent English history. And I see the same things today, frankly. Tuition fees are tens of thousands of pounds per year. People who do not have parents who are supporting them cannot attend university in the UK. You just can't do it. There is no way for you to make that choice. There are student loans, but it's not enough to cover studying and living, even with a job, the types of jobs that are available for people. It is just not a possibility. Now, what I think that, so how does this kind of play out, right? In British society? Well, first off, university education becomes a necessity because of how broad it's become for almost any job that has income or the ability to give someone a good quality of life. So certain people are literally just trapped. Like there is nothing that they can do. Maybe a couple of them get very lucky, but they are just stuck and they will be screwed over, and they will not have the means to purchase their way out. They can't deal with health issues. They can't get rent. They can't purchase the time to study skills that would get them a different job. They're just fucked, right? But then for the people who sort of are in this system, what the education becomes is something like, well, just a ticket to work in the service-based economy, which is very miserable and alienating for a lot of people.
I was going to say that itself.
But then that means that the people who have more means, what they do is they stick around in academia more, right? So what does that do? Well, that reshapes and changes the structure of academia. So as all the incentives become geared towards the hobby projects of the wealthiest children, basically, and the products that are produced have these blind spots, often, not always, but very often, to the actual state of humans, where the academy should be the place where these human problems are being dealt with. But then, within the work system, then you've got all these people who are university educated, but they're just kind of like rotting away in service jobs. But then they become jaded and they're like, well, I just want to climb the greasy pole. And if I can get home and just feel a little bit of rest from all of this like nonsense I have to deal with, which is also very understandable. But then they're like, well, I'm going to use my knowledge of the system to invest in property and stocks, and then maybe my kid can spend a few more years in the education system and pursue the hobby thing rather. And like, I'm not saying any of this to like necessarily like blame any, like there is sort of like,
we're all in it.
People like this is just the system, which is a result of political choices. And I think and just the way that this relates back to philosophy is then, so like in that Christoph Scheringer book, right? That there is a massive blind spot within philosophy for essentially how it represents the concerns of kind of upper middle class wealthy kids who might have a certain type of intelligence. They might be kind of entertained by little crossword puzzles and things like that. But it's not then about philosophy working at this ethos of, like the seeking justice in human society and producing outputs that will be able to do that. And I think that's a real shame, because it could do that. It endlessly frustrates me, but because it's not as well like the people who get the privilege often of studying these things complete idiots or something, right? Like they have skills, they just put them to use on ridiculous problems rather than and those, again, that's where it is political, right? Because it's a political choice to say, choose to further my self-interest by pursuing a funded project on AI ethics, and like that is realistically just going to be some kind of like random nonsense that isn't actually it. But I kind of convince myself, because I tell myself a story about marginal utilities of if we create an evil god AI, then I'm actually the most important person in the world in Nick Bostrom's sex cult talking about this stuff, right? But but on the other side of things, it's like there is like some genuine work that's quite humble that could be done, like looking at injustices in like local forms of politics or in the education system where neurodivergent people or women are being treated, you can deconstruct some you have a set of skills that will enable you to interrogate the interaction of values and language on a certain aspect of something where you could actually do a little bit, but it's like we often pursue the grandiose kind of the philosophy narrative justifies, these myths of, are you a great person like a Kant or a Descartes or a Plato, and do you have the big ideas that will shape everything, rather than what I think philosophy is best doing, which is just these kind of like quite humble. I agree with the dialogue thing that you said, but it's like there's a lot more value in making it more like an engineering discipline.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because you in a couple of your streams and some of the notes I took when I was listening to them, you said something like, for you, and this is you and I think we share this, because kind of worldview apropos philosophy too. It's like, really the only purpose of philosophy for me is if I have concepts and theories and frameworks that give me a better understanding of the world and myself in the world, that's good enough. Like, I don't need any. I mean, yeah, I do like partaking in metaphysics and all of that. Sure, I love it. It's my obsession. But it's the best philosophy for me is kind of like what you said. It's kind of like almost like an engineering, where can we make sense of something better in a more clear way? But at the same time, then I think here's where Wittgenstein kind of mentioned, has in his autobiography, Ray Monk's one, I think he mentions this. It's like notion that like sometimes even the presuppositions we hold, philosophy is really good at like kind of questioning, what do we presuppose? So those two things are really useful. And also another thing I kind of want to run, when you were talking, I took note, is this. You said like this thing where, like, for instance, in one of your streams, you were talking about like on the YouTube channel Computer File, when they have like a computer scientist on, they'll just say, I don't know, explain some theorem, explain some algorithm, whatever, right? But then like when it comes to more like the humanities and philosophy, there's like a long biography they read, like Cambridge scholar, Oxford scholar, like this. Like they give like a huge introduction before the person even speaks, as if like all of that has like some weight.
Well, this is a product, I think, of some of the things I was describing, right? Where then, because of some of those sorts of incentives and pressures that I'm talking about on the university system, it is kind of geared towards, I mean, that pro-felicity thing, but basically, this the criteria of success are whether or not you can say plausible or interesting things that will sell podcasts or make you be invited on TV shows or something. And that is an avenue of escape from the horrible forms of service-based economy labor that exist for people. For some people who can afford to just take the risks and stay, because they've got the kind of fallback to do so, they'll have housing or money, they'll be able to feed themselves, they'll have other opportunities will open, their dad has a company they can work in. So basically what the products are that we produce are like performances, like
and what do you mean by that? Interesting. That's
so, yeah. So like our philosophy, like what we produce. I mean, like look at what does. I mean, I like Philip Goff and everything, right? But he's, say, an academic philosopher. Like what is his output, right? And it's like the pinnacle of it is like appearing on a big podcast or having like a book launch that people will buy the book. It's not like did I don't know, like get people in the world to change their values with respect to this thing, or did I got the legal system to see that they were doing this thing that was harmful, and now there won't be injustice as a result of that. Or I gave, instead it's about kind of like offering this, part of the game is that people are doing this thing of like theorizing rather than living, of like kind of like what scientists do, like offering like speculative theories. And then there's these performances that can be given around those, where there are, dialectically opposed positions that are offered, these I don't know, antinomies, whatever. Like, are you an ismist or an anti-ismist? And here's the arguments for, and people get to watch the performance and feel like something was achieved. But I feel like all we're doing with this kind of philosophy is pacifying ourselves and creating roles for people to be performance artists who become philosophers, sort of, instead of the philosopher being a role that should, in my view, be kind of like integrated in communities, providing
Correct.
this sort of it's not medical, but it's like a kind of therapy. It's like a weird level of analysis on what's going on, but being a shouting board for people's ideas, so that to help them stitch together these weird aspects of their life and then to reflect that back in various ways, like, it is what I think it should be.
So I'll say this, right? I think I both agree, but at the same time disagree with you in this regard. So I spoke to Simon Critchley about a year and a half ago, and he said something quite interesting. He was like, a philosopher has to be an outsider within the inside. So in the sense that, like, he was kind of playing on this idea of like the philosopher kind of being like a joker or like a bit of like this eccentric figure. And that cliche or that stereotype, it's important for someone who engages in philosophy, especially in kind of the more of the humanistic philosophy that I think you and I appreciate quite a lot. Because it's not like, because it's an interesting thing. It's like, I feel right now the modern day priests are not, not these like philosophers. They're actually these self-help people, like the people like Patrick Bet-David, or like who else? I don't know, man. Self-help people. I don't even.
Andrew Huberman.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like they really are the modern day priests that like justify the pre-existing structures, the pre-existing systems. But then the sad thing is when you see like people who, because I think I kind of see where the allure, like, I mean, they've got these huge audiences, all of this money, all of this like praise all over. The sad thing is when I see like even philosophers kind of do that, people who probably should play more of like a provocative role where they aren't fully saying this is how things are, but rather they should be, in this hermeneutic kind of lens, we're constantly questioning things, where in a way, and I do like the fact that in the history of Western philosophy, Socrates was put to death, because I think ultimately the philosopher, in a symbolic sense, obviously, should be put to death because they are playing this game. But then the part I agree with you is it shouldn't be done in like this stupid deconstructive, constantly like, oh, everything is meaningless, everything is like a social concept. Okay, whatever, no shit, Sherlock. But it should be done. Frankly, here's where I probably bring in Christianity, through love, through like this idea of the fact that I'm doing this because I feel we can create a better society for ourselves. Not because I'm trying to like one up you or like make you feel like, oh, your stupid beliefs about your country or your religion, it's all nonsense. Because I think that's also really destructive for like someone more in like an academic to do.